Okay, so I want to say a big thank you to Bex Hemmingson for joining us today and to talk to us about a very popular topic, Imposter Syndrome. It's something that I read about, I'd say about 4 or 5 years ago, and I was like, oh, some other people feel that way. That was just so miraculous to me, and it was actually one of the reasons why I set up this Women's Network, because I thought that's the kind of information that we need to share and we need to talk about. And so the Women's Network was born out of that desire to start sharing and collaborating on some of this knowledge that some of us had and some of us didn't have, and my desire to sort of share all that knowledge. And 4 years later, we're having this great event on Imposter Syndrome with so many of you here, so it's great. Liz just wanted to say a few words. Liz is the director of the Government Women's Network.
Hello, I'm Liz Chin, Kia ora koutou katoa, the Program Director for the Government Women's Network. It's a great opportunity for the Government Women's Network to work in partnership with the MOJ Women's Network and Karen and her team. So we're really delighted to be working together, and it's a really good example of exactly what Women's Network is all about at the Government Women's Network level and at the agency level, where we share resources, share effort, and don't reinvent the wheel. So I think this is a really good living example of how we work together. And I know Karen attended the MSD Women's Network, which ran an event on Imposter Syndrome last year with Dr. Bex Hemmingson, and on the back of that we now have this event today. So it's a tremendous opportunity, and thank you all for being here. We have got a website. Please have a look at the information that we have there, and I've got some information about the Government Women's Network if you would like to know more about us. So thanks Karen, and thanks Bex.
Thank you. Should we all give ourselves a round of applause for this being awesome? So we're good to go?
Yeah, we're good to go.
Cool. Okay, now everyone over there, I can't come too far over there because of the camera, so can you hear me from here? Yep, cool. Right, now hang on, let's see if I click the right, oh, here we go. Okay, so we haven't even talked about what this is yet, but hands up if you think you might already have, at this point you think, yeah, I've totally got that. Goody, okay, I'm in the right room. That's always good to know. And it's such an exciting topic to talk about, I think, because did you notice how many people just put their hands up in this room? So I think it's a topic that, it spans personal development, it spans professional development, and even for those of us that didn't put our hand up and think, I'm not really sure if this is a thing for me, you can be guaranteed that somebody around you will feel impostery at some point. So it's a really good thing to bring some awareness to. So over the next hour today, which one am I doing again? No, other one. What I'd like to do is just to answer 5 questions for you about the imposter syndrome. So first of all, what is it? Where does it come from? I think that's an interesting one. Something a lot of people like to know the answer to is, do I have it? And if so, how does it show up for you? Because it does show up for people slightly differently, and we'll talk about that. And lastly, what can I do about it? That's the important thing too. Hello. So I forgot to say that the what I call the doodles, the A3 summary of what I'm about to talk through with you, that's all the content summarised on there. So you can either listen or you can follow along as you like, but those are yours to scribble all over, and there's also some reflection questions on the back that after this session you can have a good think about imposteriness for yourself, and take it from there. Some more, yep, somewhat. There's some more at the front printed copies, and there's also the e-copy has been distributed out. Yeah, cool. Right. So to kick us off, I have to say that I'm a sucker for a story. I like stories. So I thought, if you don't mind indulging me, I'll tell you a story. And all good stories start with once upon a time. So once upon a time, there was a little girl. And when she was 5 years old, she'd expressed some interest in ballet dancing. So her mother thought, okay, well, I'll take you to some lessons. So she went along to ballet, and at the end of the class, the teacher came up to her mother and said, where has your daughter danced before? And her mother said, oh, no, this is her first ballet class. And the teacher was surprised by that, because this little girl must have shown some promise as a ballerina. So she carried on with her dancing. Some seats up the front. Yeah. Hello. Welcome. No, hey, hold on. It's going to get very hot in here, isn't it? All these bodies. Anyway, so she carried on doing her ballet. She did really well in her exams. She did well in competitions. But eventually, when she was about 13, she actually gave it up, much to her mother's dismay, ballet mother dismay. As she was growing up, she did okay at school. Didn't always get A+, but did reasonably well at school. When she was in the 7th form, or what's it called now? Year 13, something like that, yeah. She went off to boarding school and she was elected as a prefect. She was head boarder, voted in by her peers and staff. Then she went on to university and graduated with first-class honours and then completed a PhD in forensic psychology. And as she was doing all of that, she started at Les Mills, started doing group fitness classes, and somebody said to her one day, "Hey, have you ever thought about becoming an instructor?" No. But anyway, so she did that too. And after a couple of years, she was selected to be on the New Zealand squad, which is kind of like the All Blacks of the instructing world, where you go and you do presentations and you train other instructors and so on. So she did that, does that. And in any role she's had, she's kind of, gets reports back that she does pretty well. She exceeds expectations, she works hard, and she hits the mark. So anyway, that's the story. And now I want to ask a question of whether those achievements sound impressive. Yeah. And I'd agree if they were anyone's other than my own, because they're mine. But I have had a very hard time in my own life actually internalizing any of that achievement as being mine. And as, being down to, hard work, consistent effort and grittiness and just hustling, and explaining it away as anything other than to do with something to do with me. So maybe good luck, fluke, someone feeling sorry for me, or just thinking, we'll just give her a chance. When I was a ballerina, I used to think, I'm not like these other girls. I'm bigger than them. I'm not a petite little ballerina. When I was elected prefect, I thought, well, people must just like my personality. I'm not really that brainy, so it can't be anything to do with that. When I graduated with my thesis, even, I had an international examiner who said, "This is the best thesis I've read in the past 5 years." And my first response was, well, duh, of course, because my supervisors helped me with it, so it's pretty much their work. All of these excuses. And it was actually my PhD examiner who said to me in the end, "Bex, you know how you have trouble actually accepting your achievements and thinking they're your own. Do you know that this actually is a thing?" No. Yes, it's a thing, and it even has a name. It's called the Imposter Syndrome. And then, like any good research supervisor, she then sent me all the research that there was to do about this topic. And that's where I just got really, really interested in it. And, personal experience, the research on it, and just how people find this experience. I mean, how do you find it if you think you have it? Anyone want to share any ideas? Do you find it tough? Yeah, it actually sucks. It sucks. And in terms of what it actually means, if we put a label on it, this isn't a scientific definition. It's kind of mine, based on science. But what it is a psychological pattern when we doubt our accomplishments and we have a persistent fear of the talent police showing up at any second. So constantly that sort of looking over your shoulder like, oh, any minute now, someone's going to come and realise I actually have no effing idea what I'm doing. Maybe we even felt like this at some point this morning. I did. I feel it on a daily basis. And what's interesting is that this feeling is despite lots of evidence to the contrary. There's heaps of evidence that you're actually doing pretty well, but you do not feel like you are. So the imposter syndrome was something that was discovered by two psychologists in about the 1970s, and they were doing work with really high-achieving academic women who they were sort of seeing for other therapeutic work, but what they started to notice is that these women they were so capable, but internally they were full to the brim with self-doubt. And it was actually, it was getting problematic for their well-being. It can be very distressing, it can cause anxiety, and it just messes with, the joy of being able to celebrate your own achievements. And I guess I like to kind of think about it, and it's sort of like a mask. where your public and your private self feel very different. So you know, everybody else thinks you're super capable, but on the inside, it's a different story. So that's what it is. And now, before anyone sits here freaking out and thinking, oh my God, I've got a full-blown syndrome, and I'm going to have to go and bring a psychologist after this session, let me just clarify for you a few things about what the imposter syndrome is and what it is not, just to calm the freak out if you're having one. Because it is actually not a recognised disorder or syndrome. So this is the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, which is the big diagnostic book that psychs use. And you won't find it in there. It's not a syndrome, despite what the name says. And the reason why it's not in there is because it's actually so normal. You saw how many people put up their hands at the start to say, yep, I feel like that. One study estimates that at least 70% of people will feel like this at some point in their life. And I reckon that's an underestimation, to be honest. I think more people than that would feel like that. So it's completely normal. It's not a syndrome. And in fact, the psychologist that discovered it said, actually, if we had our time over again, we'd probably call it something different, like the imposter complex or the imposter experience or imposter feelings, just so it's not, if you feel like that, you don't feel so abnormal, because so many other people feel like it too. The other thing is that it's not necessarily an on or off, yes or no thing, whereby, you know, we either have it or we don't. It's actually better conceptualised as sitting on more of a continuum, or like a dimensional thing, where some of us will feel it a little, some of us sometimes, and some of us a lot. And it can certainly fluctuate depending on your age, your life stage, your context, sometimes even the people you are around. Does anyone notice they feel more impostery around certain people? Yeah, like maybe bosses or whatever. My PhD supervisor makes me feel this big in about 2 seconds. And not because she's trying, but I just respect her so much that I feel like I know nothing when I'm in her company. And I don't want her to ask me any questions because I probably won't know the answer. And I've talked to people as well that say, oh, actually, my imposter syndrome has gone down with age. It actually feels better as I get older because, yeah, you're nodding too, yeah. And why do you think it feels like it's gone down or has gone down?
A greater sense of comfort with yourself as you get older, I think.
Yeah, totally. Just knowing who you are and kind of owning it more. Yeah. And maybe, you know, professionally we have, a greater sense of self-efficacy in what we're doing, maybe a little more confidence if we've been doing things for longer. But what's interesting is that I've heard the opposite from people as well in talks like this who say, actually, mine gets worse as I get older because, you know, as I get older, I take on more and more responsibility, often professionally. And the more I keep going, the more I realise I know nothing. And, you know, the more and more I'm outside my comfort zone, and therefore the more I feel like an imposter. So it's quite interesting. It's very different for each of us. And I'll just have a sip of water. I'm really pleased there are 2 gentlemen here today. I'm not going to put you on the spot at all, but well, actually I am. Can I ask you a question about, did you come along today out of interest or because you feel that you have this and you wanted to know more? You feel you have it? Interesting. Who would have thought before we started talking that it was just a female thing? Would you have assumed, like, mostly for just females? Yeah. It's really interesting because people say that to me all the time, like, oh, Bex, surely it's just a female thing. Well, it's actually not. So we have evidence that it's not here in the room today. And also studies show that men feel it too. Men have the imposter syndrome too, but the key difference is what they do with it, how they respond to it. So, for example, there's a study with, I think, American undergrads that found that women in this study who scored high on a measure of imposter syndrome, they just sort of dug their heels in and worked even harder to try and prove themselves and their competence. Whereas men who scored high avoided situations where their strengths where they couldn't play to their strengths. So they just kind of avoided any situations where they could look incompetent. So it's just a different response to feeling like an imposter, but it doesn't mean it's not there for me. Do you know how you respond?
I get like paralysed in apathy and not wanting to do anything.
Yes. So you just like
Yeah,
nothing.
I just like no,
Avoid.
I might fail. I'm just going to
Not, yes,
Yeah.
and that's really interesting because we'll talk about that too in terms of how impostoriness can manifest in your behaviour, and that's definitely one way. Yep. Nice. So that's what it is. That's a little bit about where it comes from. What it is and what it's not, I should say. Now, in terms of where it comes from, that's quite an interesting question, and like anything with psychology, it's kind of a coming together of many things. But a major thing are the experiences and learning that we have when we're young, and the messages that we learn as we grow up about, success, achievement, failure, and what that means. This is a biggie. That it kind of is the foundation of a lot of beliefs that we have about competence, which we'll talk more about later as well. So, did anyone ever grow up in a family where if you came home with a report card that had like 6 A+ on it and 1 A-, your mum or dad were like, "Oh, what's that A- doing there?" Did you? Yeah, I did too. So that kind of thing can give us start forming a belief about, oh, okay, well, A-, oh gosh, it wasn't A+, so I failed. Or if you have, messages around you of sort of like, if you're going to do something, you must do it properly, which is kind of like, okay, failure, bad, must not fail, must try and be perfect. Or my mum, she hates me sharing this example, but what my mum used to do, she still does it actually, I'm 35 years old and she still does this to me. If I'm sort of trying to do something new or something I might not know how to do, like cook a meal, I suck at that, that's probably a good example, she'll only let me struggle for a little bit, and then she'll kind of interject and say, oh, let me help with that, Barb, I'll show you how to do it. And she used to do that all the time when I was little. It really triggers me now because it annoys me, because what that kind of sent to me was the message that you need to get it right the first time, and failing along the way is not a thing. You just need to do it right. So here, I'll show you how to do it. And you can see why she doesn't like me sharing that example, because she's just trying to be nice and just trying to help. But I think that kind of formed that belief in me, those beliefs in me. And then you might have grown up in a family where lots of praise was actually withheld. And not because our parents were awful, but because they, it's sort of like there's no need to get a big head about our achievements. We don't need to praise that too much. But then we grow up as an adult and we find it hard to kind of, we don't feel deserving of success if we get lots of praise. And the opposite is true too. If we grew up with lots of praise, we were getting it all the time when we were younger, and then as we get older, if we're not getting it all the time, we're not being validated, we start to question our own performance and our own capability. So it's really interesting, those different beliefs, and I see people nodding, and so you can sort of start to get a sense for yourself of how your beliefs about competence might have been formed by those early experiences that we have. Who's a perfectionist in the room? Are you the same people that put up your hand and said you think you have imposter syndrome? Yeah. I'm not surprised at all, because there are aspects of personality, including perfectionism, that are often associated with feeling like an imposter. I must clarify here, or make a distinction for you, that there are actually 2 different types of perfectionism, and one is more helpful than the other. So we've got adaptive perfectionism, or what you might think of as functional perfectionism, which is when we're really driven, we're really organised, and we thrive off, success and having goals. But we're also okay with making mistakes along the way. That's adaptive perfectionism. Whereas maladaptive perfectionism is when we're really driven, we really thrive off success, but we're not okay with making mistakes. We take mistakes and failure as a sign of a personal defect, and we feel like, that perfection is the only avenue to sort of self-acceptance. That's maladaptive perfectionism, and that's the one that's strongly related as a personality characteristic to imposter syndrome. And also a couple of other personality type things is, I suck, which is just a representation of kind of having a lower sense of efficacy and self-confidence. So lower confidence has been associated with it, and also higher anxiety as well. So if we're someone who worries just in general about life and about the world, that's been linked to impostoriness. So is that answering the question for you so far of what it is and where it comes from? Yeah. Does anyone have any questions at this point before we move on to do you have it?
So I think Bex, it's interesting. I'm reading, although I'm having read to me actually, Michelle Obama's book.
Yes.
And her, all the way through that, she says, am I good enough? And that's what she had said all of her life, and seems to resonate with this as well.
Totally. It's a constant feeling of not being good enough, eh?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter, like with this, it doesn't matter how many achievements you get, none of it matters to dispel the belief that you have that you're, you know, and so that's why it can become really hard to switch off. I've found, you know, it's always like, right, next thing, next achievement, now I'll do a degree, then I'll do that, then I'll do this, and maybe the next achievement will mean that I'm enough.
She was sort of saying when they got elected the second time, it was sort of a relief of that happening, plus knowing that he wouldn't be a politician sort of 3 years later, because you know, you do it twice.
Yeah.
But that was still, you know, are we good enough? Am I good enough?
Are we good enough? Yeah. And I think it's not a bad thing to constantly wonder that. I think, you know, we can kind of crucify impostoriness. There are some good bits to it in terms of, you know, I guess staying humble and always asking yourself the question, could I be doing more? I don't think we all want to be walking around with big heads and thinking we're so awesome that we never have to try anything ever again. But it's just when we hang out in that zone all the time is when it really starts to mess with your enjoyment of life and learning experiences and well-being and so on. So that's what we want to avoid, is hanging out there too long. So what I'd like to do now is answer the question for you of do you have it? So you'll already have a sense of this for yourself, but we're kind of wanting to get a bit more fine-grained in terms of, if you do, how might you have the imposter syndrome? What flavour do you have? Which flavour of imposter syndrome? So what I'm going to do now is just show you on the slides a series of statements, and I just want to ask if, or actually keep it to yourself for now, but just have a read through them and see if they resonate. Okay, they're going to be colour-coded, and the colours matter for later. So here's your green statements. Can everyone on the camera see us? I can read them out too. So I often have difficulty delegating. Does that resonate? If I miss the mark on something, I ruminate about it for days and tell myself, I'm not cut out for this. And I feel like my work should be 100% perfect 100% of the time. If those resonate for you, would you mind just making a mark on your page somewhere? Green, yeah, just a tick. Or if they don't, cross. It's awesome to see you, Lou, by the way. I'm confused about the context. I think we're doing body combat. Okay, so that's the green ones. Ready to go into the next one? How about the yellow ones? So for everybody over there in the camera, when I'm faced with a setback, my confidence drops. I feel a sense of shame that I haven't performed well. I find new challenges uncomfortable because I worry I might not be good at the new thing I'm trying. So if those resonate, put yellow and a tick or a cross. Do you need to resonate with all of them or just one? Just one, even just, you know, you just like, yeah, that feels sort of like me. Yep. Okay. What's this? Purple? Pink? Purple. Whatever. I feel that I should be able to accomplish things on my own, and if I need a mentor to help me, then it's not really my achievement. So for purple, tick or cross. Blue. There's a few for this. Okay, I shy away from applying for jobs unless I meet the majority of the requirements. Why are you laughing? I so do that. And then I started to apply and I got none of them, so it just reinforced my imposter beliefs, didn't it? I constantly seek out further training or certifications because I need to improve my skills in order to succeed. I shudder if someone calls me an expert. And even when I've been in a job role for a while, I still feel like I don't know enough. Blue, tick or cross, resonate or not? And the final statements are the red ones. So despite numerous achievements, I feel like I haven't truly earned my title, so I feel pressured to work harder and longer to prove my worth. Because I'm often working, my hobbies and passions have fallen by the wayside a little, and I get stressed when I'm not working and find downtime wasteful. So red ones, tick or cross. Okay. Self-diagnose. Are you ready? Not that it's a syndrome, but what those statements are from this wonderful book that I cannot talk about enough, which is The Secret Thoughts of Successful Women by Valerie Young. I looked up on Book Depository. You can get it for $37, free shipping to New Zealand. Does anyone use the Book Depository? Yeah, it's so good, eh? But this is such a wonderful book. And she's actually got a TED Talk as well, which I can send the link to if you wanted to distribute after. Yeah, it's a really good TED Talk. Great stuff. And what Valerie Young differentiates in this book are 5 different, what I call flavours of impostoriness that map onto each of those statements that we just had a look at. And the difference between each of the flavours is simply our beliefs, slightly different beliefs about competence that are, formed from different experiences we've had that we talked about when we're growing up. So as we go through them, you might find that, 1, 2, 3, all 5, or maybe none of them resonate for you. But it's just a nice way to actually get some deeper awareness of how imposter syndrome is for you. And I have to admit, I'm in recovery from all 5 types, and they still pop up for me. But all of them resonate for me. So let's see what you think. So a reminder that the green statements were these: difficulty delegating, ruminating if you miss the mark, feeling like you should be perfect. What flavour of impostoriness do we think this is? Perfectionism? Yep. That is the perfectionist flavour. So if this is you, if those statements resonated with you, you might have a competence belief, something along the lines of, I should have done better and mistakes are unacceptable. And when I first saw this, I thought, no, I don't know if I think mistakes are unacceptable. But then I reflected on how I feel when I make a mistake, and I think I do actually have that belief about myself, that I'm actually not allowed to make mistakes. I need to do something about that belief because they're inevitable. So the perfectionist, your gauge of success or competence for yourself will be absolute flawlessness. You hate failure because you interpret it as some kind of personal defect. And we're sort of in a catch-22 situation where we set ridiculously high standards for ourselves. And then if we don't meet them, we think, well, of course I told you. I mean, I was an imposter, so of course I wasn't going to meet them. But then if we do meet the high standards, we tell ourselves, oh, well, I should have set the bar higher. So there's kind of no way to win if you're the perfectionist type of imposter. Does this one resonate for many people? Yep. I think this one's probably one of the most common, I think. So just make a note for yourself if you've got a bit of a summary down there. So yes, perfectionist, that's me. I've got that flavour. The yellow one, just a reminder, that was about your confidence dropping if you have a setback, a sense of shame, avoiding new challenges because you worry you might not be good at it. This one is what we call the natural genius flavour of impostoriness. And one of your competence beliefs might be something like, if I were actually smart, or if I were really smart, this would be effortless. Does that... yeah, I totally have that one too. So we kind of believe that you're either good at something or you're not. That people are born with, innate talent, skills and strengths, and you think you don't have them. So, I remember saying all through my study, I'm not a stats person. I can't do stats. I'm never going to get through psychology because I can't do stats. I just can't. And I just had made the assumption that it was so hard for me and it took so long. I thought, I suck at this. I'm a complete imposter at even the whole academic scene, actually. Because it's very similar to Carol Dweck's concept of a fixed mindset. Yeah, very similar. So our hallmark, our sort of gauge of whether we're being successful or competent is not necessarily perfection, but it's lack of effort, like something feeling effortless, and us being able to do it quickly. So if we feel like something takes a lot of effort and we're really slow at it, our imposter syndrome alarm starts to go off. But it's interesting, because if we look at other successful, we look at other successful people and we think, oh, it's just so easy for them. They make it look so easy, and I spent my whole life at university doing that, comparing myself to other people, thinking, how did they know the answer to that in 3 seconds? I'm not like them. It was the same at ballet. How can they do that? I can't do that. I've just done that all my life. But actually, if we ask the most successful people on the planet, they will say to you, no, that wasn't effortless at all. That took me hours and hours of grind and hard work and failure. And I think that's really nicely illustrated by Michelangelo in this quote, that if people knew how hard I worked to get my mastery, it would not seem actually that wonderful at all. But it's so easy when you have that sense of impostoriness to look at others and think, well, I should be able to do it as quickly or as effortlessly as them. So that's the natural genius. How about the pinky purple ones? So feeling like you should accomplish things on your own, and feeling like if we need a mentor, then it's not really your achievement. Does that one resonate with people? Yeah, this one's often a bit sort of like, not as much. I'm in recovery from this one too. And it's what we would call the rugged individualist flavour of impostoriness. And your core competence belief is something along the lines of the only achievements that really matter are the ones that I got myself. And I think my personal illustration of this was what I mentioned earlier, which was when I got that wonderful comment from my examiner that said, this is the best thing in 5 years. And straight away I thought, well, yeah, but it's not really my achievement because my supervisors helped me with it. Some of their ideas are in here, so it's not just me. And so our kind of gauge for success, if you like, that success means solo, unaided achievement. We can't have any help, and asking for help feels like failure because we think we should know how to do it on our own. So that's the rugged individualist. Is anyone tracking along with all three so far? Yeah, me too. Don't worry, there is hope for us. We'll talk about that. Okay, the blue one. Shying away from jobs if you feel you don't meet the majority of requirements, feeling like you don't know enough even if you've been in a role for ages, absolutely shuddering if someone calls you an expert, and constantly seeking out further qualifications or certifications. This is what we call the expert flavour of impostoriness, where we believe if I were actually smart, I'd know everything there is to know. Now tell me if that belief is a bit silly. But we have it still, right? I do. I mean, before I came here today, do you know what I was doing? Reading articles on the Imposter Syndrome in case there was something more that I needed to know on the topic, in case somebody asked me a question I didn't know the answer to. I'm not kidding. That's why I say I'm in recovery, because I still experience it for sure. I have to manage it, and we'll talk about that to finish. But this is when you feel distinctly underqualified. And so you're constantly seeking out more certifications or knowledge or whatever, just in case somebody asks you something, or you might look incompetent if you don't know the answer. Just never feel, it's like researching the end of the internet. There is no end to know, even if you are an expert, there's still things you won't know, because that's just the reality. And you'd probably never expect any other expert to know everything there absolutely is to know about a topic, but we expect it of ourselves. And that's the one that can get really hard in terms of being able to switch off, because you're constantly, you don't know when to stop, because you think that there should be more, that maybe I need to do more. I remember my friend, when I wanted to get into coaching and stuff like that, I said to her, oh, maybe I need to do like a life coaching course or something. And she said, Bex, quote, are you effing serious? You've got a PhD in psychology. I don't think you need to do a life coaching course. But I thought, yeah, but I'm not an expert in coaching. I know about psychology. So this was my thought process. And I could have spent thousands of dollars and more time, when really I just probably needed to get in there and give it a go. I didn't need another piece of paper. Okay, so that's the expert. And then lastly, the red one. So these are, feeling pressured to work harder and longer to prove your worth, getting stressed when you're not, when you're not working, finding downtime stressful because you think, I'm wasting my life, I should be doing something, I should be achieving something. I've definitely got that one. And, hobbies and passions, and sometimes relationships as well falling by the wayside because you're working, because you feel you have to keep working. This is called the superhero flavour of imposteriness. And your belief is, if I were really competent, I'd be able to do it all. So our kind of measure of success is being able to juggle all of the things flawlessly. So, we might expect ourselves to be beautifully presented, the best mum, the best baker in the neighbourhood, CEO in our career, on the board of trustees for your children, coaching all of their sports teams, or all of it. You have to do it all. That's often the pressure the superhero imposter will put on themselves. So that's the 5 flavours. Does that help to give you some insight into kind of the nuances so rather than just I feel like an imposter, but now you might know how and in what ways and kind of what beliefs are underlying your feeling imposter. And then, of course, we can get to the bit where we start to challenge some of those beliefs in ourselves once we've now got awareness of them. But before we do that, I thought we could just answer the question of how this stuff manifests. So regardless of which flavours resonate for you, how can imposteriness show up in our behaviour? And we've kind of touched on it with the first example. Two key things. One is that if we're met with a new challenge, we just avoid it completely. Yes, because we have that sense of this is going to be really way too hard, so I'm just not going to do it. I want to completely avoid the possibility, the possible shame and humiliation of looking like I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm just not going to do it. That's a common one. I used to do that all the time. If I thought that I didn't have a certain level of efficacy at something, I just would politely decline and not do it. We're sort of wanting to minimise any reason at all that our performance or our competence might be judged somehow. But of course, when we do that, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot because the way to success is to actually give new things a go, learn, fail, try again. So we're the only ones who lose, really. It's uncomfortable, but it's actually going to help our success rather than limit it. Now, the other one, see if you recognise yourself in this. This is what I call the imposter cycle. And it goes a little something like this. Imagine you're given a new kind of achievement-related task of some kind, or at least you're perceived that you have to achieve. So it might be a new project at work, could be anything where, you need to deliver on something, people are looking at your performance. And we often have kind of one of two responses. The first is that we procrastinate because the whole thing just feels overwhelming because we think, oh my gosh, I've got to, do this quickly and effortlessly. I've got to do this perfectly. I don't even know where to start. So then we procrastinate. And then that's followed up with a frenzied amount of action because, of course, we still have to deliver on this thing that we've been asked to do. So we run ourselves into the ground and we burn out because we've spent so long procrastinating in fear that we don't know what we're doing, and so we waited so long to begin. Does that resonate? Yeah. The second one is that we horrendously over-prepare because we want to minimise any chances of, no gaps, nothing left unturned. I've done it all. I know all of the things. I know all of the answers. And then, of course, that's also frenzied action because we're working all hours of the day and night. We can't relax on the weekends because we're reading one more thing about that thing that we have to do and know about. And then we also burn ourselves out. And so then what happens is that we end up actually doing quite a good job because, believe it or not, imposters are actually really capable, awesome people. And we might have a slight sense of relief for about 5 minutes. But then, once people start giving us good feedback about the work that we did, rather than enjoying our success and our achievement, we start telling ourselves little impostery stories, which, if we procrastinated in the first place, goes something along the lines of, well, I was just actually pretty lucky because I did it all at the last minute, so that was just a fluke, that I did a good job. Or, if you over-prepared in the first place, well, yeah, of course I did well because I worked, 80-hour week and I spent hours and hours and hours on this, and anyone who spent that much time on it would do that well. Resonate? Yeah. So that's the imposter cycle, and then so we don't get to enjoy our achievements, maybe only for like 5 minutes, and then the cycle kicks off all again the next time we're given the same type of task. So that's another one I'd encourage you to make a note of, do I procrastinate, do I over-prepare, and is that actually serving me? Am I burning myself out in the process? Because often you will. Maybe not burn out, but you just won't relax very much. So that's how it can show up in behaviour. And the last little bit is to answer, well, what can we do about it? What can we do about these feelings? And I think the first really key step, the thing to acknowledge, is that the only difference between us who feel like an imposter and people who don't feel like an imposter are feelings. That's the only difference. We feel like one, they don't. And what normally comes first before feelings is thinking patterns, habitual ways of thinking or beliefs that we have about competence, like we spoke about. So the first step to changing how we feel, impostery, is changing how we think. And thinking is a really good starting point because feelings are really kind of ingrained sometimes. They can catch us, they feel really strong, they feel really compelling, and therefore they feel really like the truth. So if we take a step back and look at the thinking around feeling like an imposter, it can be helpful. So what I need to put out there, though, is a little disclaimer to start with, that we can do as much kind of tweaking of thinking as we like, but it doesn't mean we're going to completely eradicate the imposter syndrome. I don't know how to do that. I'm still trying, but I don't have the answer. What I do know is that these types of things that we'll talk about in terms of strategies can help just to turn the volume down on it a bit so that it's not so, in your face and doesn't affect our behaviour so much. It's a management strategy rather than a way to totally get rid of it, because it will pop up naturally. There are contexts that you might find yourself in where it will naturally pop up. So the first thing that I like to remember, and I try and remember this in many areas of life actually, it's very helpful, is that feelings are not facts. It's so simple but so effective, isn't it? Feelings are not facts. But what we often engage in is kind of a narrative where we think, I feel like an imposter, therefore I am an imposter. But not so. Not everything that we think is factual. So, feelings and thoughts are things that literally just run through our mind. That's all they are. They're neither good nor bad, or true or false. They're just things that float through our mind. So that the trouble becomes not so much if you feel like an imposter, but if you grab that thought or that feeling and you pull it closer to you and you fuse with it and you accept it as your truth and your reality and you let it influence your behaviour. That's the problem. So we can either do that, or we can recognise we have a choice whether we actually act on thoughts and feelings or not. And if we don't want to, we then just need to create a bit of mental space between ourselves and the thought or feeling we had that we are an imposter. So what I mean by that is, I just do a simple thing these days that I've found really, really helpful, and it sounds ridiculous, and sometimes I wouldn't say it out loud, but just an internal dialogue where I just say to myself, hello, imposter syndrome. Thank you for turning up yet again on another day. Thanks so much for coming by. I acknowledge that you're there, but guess what? I actually don't have time to enter in a conversation with you right now because I've got a really long to-do list and you're not helping me with it. And then I just mentally try and put it over in the corner in a box with a bow or something like that and just leave it over there. So I'm not trying to get rid of the thought necessarily, because we all know that when we do that, if we try and push thoughts away, they just come back stronger. But I just acknowledge that it's there and then just push it aside, because it's actually not it's not helping me. It's not helping me to feel successful. It's not helping me to get through my work. So I'll just leave you in the box for now. And I've found, it sounds simple and ridiculous, but it actually helps to take the kind of power out of the thought. And it's much easier to just not accept it as your truth or your reality if you don't give it the power. It sounds a bit Tony Robbins, but a bit woo-woo, but it's true. So just acknowledging it's there, but then just pushing it aside and get on with what you need to do. The next, of course, is reframing our competence beliefs. So obviously we talked about those 5 different flavours of competence beliefs that feed into the different imposter-ness, and how when you say them out loud, you realise that they're really, really unhelpful. So, you know, if we have the perfectionist type of imposter-ness, maybe just start asking yourself different questions. So maybe, you know, how can I avoid mistakes and be perfect in this situation? What about how can I add value? Feels different, eh? Just asking yourself that question and not expecting yourself to be perfect, but just how about I just aim for adding value in whatever I'm doing, whatever project, whatever new role I've been promoted to that I feel impostery in, I'll just try and add value. Because at the end of the day, that's all we can really do, eh? What does perfection even mean? I'm still trying to figure that out. How do you define that? What does success look like? Often we can't even define it, but we expect ourselves to be it. And then we decide we're failing at it, but we don't even know what it is. Or if you were the natural genius flavour, you know, maybe instead we say, oh, is it really about, you know, effortlessness, or is it actually about deliberate practice and being willing to put in time and grind to actually learn things and achieve things? Or for the rugged individualist, isn't it actually awesome to have input from other people? Doesn't that make you a much stronger kind of, you know, your achievement much stronger if you've had input from other people? That's smart, to surround yourself with people who know a lot of stuff that you don't know, rather than expecting yourself to know it and achieve it on your own. Same with the superhero kind. You know, do I really have to do everything on my own? Or does competence mean being able to identify the most important priorities and learning how to say no to the other ones? So it's bringing some awareness to those beliefs and then challenging them. If they're not serving you anymore, if they're not working, you can choose to get rid of them, because we learn the beliefs somehow. We just need to unlearn them by practicing different ways of thinking that are more helpful. And this one's interesting. Have you ever thought, like I hear this all the time at the gym, oh, Bex, I really want to join the gym, but I'm not very confident yet. I need to build my confidence up first, or even better, I need to lose 5 kgs before I come to the gym. But honestly though, seriously, has there ever been a time when you think, I'd love to do that, but I just need to build my confidence a little bit? Hey. And so I hear that from people a lot, and especially people who feel impostery, when really it's the taking the action that gives you the confidence, rather than needing confidence to do something before you can take action. So, you know, we often tell ourselves that as imposters, yeah, I know, no, I'm not confident in that yet, so I just won't do it. But it's through taking action that you get a sense of clarity about what you're doing, you get some certainty, and that is what builds your confidence, rather than the other way around. So the key there is actually just jump, just do it before you feel ready, or before you have, you know, you can be absolutely clueless, but just do it and you'll learn. And that's how all those successful people that we look at and think, oh, it's so easy for them, they just did that. They just got in and did it. And we're okay with failing, because, you know, what else is life for, really, other than experimenting, mucking it up and trying again, even though it hurts on the way sometimes. And the last couple, how are we going for time? 10 cool. I hear from people a lot about kind of wanting to skip to the expert part straight away. I want to do this myself. I don't like not knowing what I'm doing. I'm a control freak and a perfectionist and an imposter. It's a tough life. But to give you an example, I talked to a client once who was a mature PhD student, and she'd been in health for many years on the front line and then decided to do a PhD. And she was really distressed, really anxious and stressed about the fact she was, get this, 3 months into her PhD. That's pretty fresh. And she just said to me, oh, Bex, I should know what I'm doing. This feels so hard. I should know what I'm doing. I've been in health for so long. And I said to her, how many PhDs have you done before though? Oh, none. This is my first one. Oh, okay. How long have you been doing it? 3 months. Oh, okay. Do you actually think that you should know what you're doing by now? No one knows what they're doing. Especially, even by the end of your PhD, you still don't know what you're doing. But especially 3 months in. So she was expecting herself to go from novice to expert in 5 seconds, rather than actually enjoying the process of being that work in progress and learning and kind of being completely clueless and embracing the fact that her work could have taken so many directions. And she wasn't doing that because she was lazy. She didn't just want to skip to the end, but because she didn't realise there was all that mucky bit in between that every successful person has to muddle their way through. And it's sort of having that beginner's mindset that it's okay not to know everything. That's the fun part. And now I'm really going to get Tony Robbins on it, because the last thing to say is that, if you tone it down, life can't hear you. So, we've all got talents and strengths and unique things to contribute to the world, but if we're being held back from feeling like an imposter, the world can't hear you. And life's too short to sort of hang back, right? Just, it's super short. So I think that was a turning point for me with my imposter syndrome, was to actually think, okay, if I died tomorrow, would I still want to be held back by this thing? And the answer was no, which is why I started practicing some of these strategies. And for myself, I found that they work. As I mentioned, they don't take it away, but they just sort of allow me to keep going rather than being so snared by it and so influenced by it. But then, you know what, if all else fails, then just remember this. No one has a clue, do we? We might think we do. We don't. Everyone's still trying to figure it out. So I think that's quite a freeing thing to remember as well. Even your CEO will feel like an imposter. J-Lo feels like an imposter. Kate Winslet feels like an imposter. Every famous actress you can think of, Jodie Foster, Meryl Streep, they all have the imposter syndrome. They've all admitted to it publicly. It's so normal. And, no matter what, people don't know what they're doing, and they feel like an imposter too. That's a lot of talking from me. So, we have 5 minutes left. If that's it from me. But questions, comments, anecdotes, yes.
Yeah, I'm worried that I'm passing on my perfectionism and impostery stuff to my kids.
I knew that someone would ask that. Yes,
and
yes.
You talked about things not to do. Is there any sort of one thing you can think of that's really good to not?
Yeah, so the question was, if everyone could, what if I'm passing on my perfectionism and imposteriness to my kids? What can we do? I think, just normalising failure and just encouraging it, actually. So encouraging growth mindset in children. So, not necessarily meaning that we wouldn't encourage them to sort of strive and things like that, but that failure is part of the learning process, and we should feel excited about failure because we can't learn without it. That type of thing I think is really powerful. And have you read about growth mindset? Yeah, cool. Yeah. So Carol Dweck's stuff, if you haven't, on fixed and growth mindset is really cool, and it feeds a lot into this, because having that mindset challenges that perception of needing to be perfect and failure being like a personal defect. It's actually helped me to realise that failure is to be celebrated. And it just, I think, I'm not a parent yet. I will be in September, everybody, just quietly. My work doesn't even know that yet, so I just publicly announced it anyway. But I feel like an imposter parent because I don't. But I think, just letting kids try things for themselves and not sort of like my mum sort of, I'll do it, just letting them, you probably do that already, but. And just maybe encouraging the adaptive form of perfectionism rather than the maladaptive form. And I think what's cool as a parent is it starts with you role modelling it, so you can kind of tweak your own behaviour so that you make sure that you're passing on good messages, helpful messages. Yeah.
Thanks.
Welcome. Does it? Liz?
Bex, is there something about people just not taking themselves so seriously?
Totally, I think. Yes. So the question was, shall we just not take ourselves so seriously? I think so. I honestly, it sounds morbid, and people think I'm a bit morbid, but I always do the deathbed test, and I think, when I'm on my deathbed and I look back at this, is this actually going to matter, like this mistake or whatever? And often the answer is no. It's not. In the overall scheme of things, it's actually not going to matter, but we can get so caught up in, oh God, I've got to achieve this, be perfect or whatever, but just, it takes a lot of practice, but just trying to chill out a bit, because it's all not as serious as we can think. It feels like it. It's all relative and we get caught up in stuff, but it's not. It's not. We don't know what could happen tomorrow. Hence why we should, just get rid of the impostoriness and do things. Just give it a go. Yeah. Any other? Yes, hi.
Hi. Are there any findings about when a person's imposter syndrome can sort of flip itself on its head and manifest in defensiveness about their accomplishments or title or that kind of thing?
I don't know. I haven't seen anything. That doesn't mean there's not. But defensive. Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. I'm not sure. Would you like to do a study? Just research it. Would you like to do a PhD? Honestly though, I'll look that up. I'll have a look, and I can, if there is, I can forward it with other links. We'll see. Yeah, I'll answer the question for you. Damn it! I didn't read that one article. I didn't know the answer. I'm not going to ruminate about it. I promise.
Bex, I have one about, so I guess, like, when you're conscious of the imposter syndrome, and like you said, you say, like, oh, I don't need you right now, you're not helpful, like, I've got this. What if you don't actually believe that you've got this? Like the voice inside your head, is it just, like, over time you just have to, like, just pretend that you believe that voice?
Practice. Yeah. And you won't believe it. It'll take ages and ages and ages, but it's just acknowledging again that you don't have to believe it or not. It's just acknowledging that's just a thought. It's just a belief. And it can either be true, but it might not be true. So, the question I ask is whether I believe it or not. I don't care whether my beliefs are true or not, but are they helpful? Is it helpful? Is it helping me go and do what I want to do? And if it's not, I just have to keep going and push that over there a bit. Yeah. So I try not to get caught up in like, oh, but, you can sort of make an evidence list for yourself about here are all the reasons why this might be true or false. But I find it's just much quicker to ask myself the question, is this a helpful belief? And if it's not, then I'm just going to try and keep going. It's hard. It takes a lot of practice. But what we've become, this stuff has just become automatic in our brain. It just happens. So we need to almost rewire the brain, which is, we absolutely can, but it takes a lot of practice, and it takes consistent practice, and it takes awareness and constantly pulling yourself up and thinking, hang on a minute. And then gradually we start to create new pathways that become the automatic, and those ones start to become the non-automatic ones.
Do you have any advice for working with or living with people who have a lot of imposter syndrome, and how are you from the outside? Is there ways that you can help other people?
Yeah, I just think just bringing their awareness to the fact that maybe their beliefs about themselves, might not be true. Sort of, it's hard, you don't, sort of combating it with like, oh, but you did this and you did, that doesn't work really, but it's kind of using some of these strategies or bringing awareness of these to other people, because, maybe helping them to understand. You might say, it's a really normal thing that you feel like that. Like it's not abnormal, and there's some really, straightforward explanations as to where it comes from. But it doesn't have to be crippling if you don't want it to be. Just sharing this conversation, spread it to the masses that it's not just you. Everybody feels like that. I mean, I know that someone in the MSD talk said, I still though look around the room and think, no, actually, I'm the only real imposter in here, and you guys don't actually have it. And that's really normal too, but we all feel like the real imposter. Everybody. Yeah. So just share the conversation. It's normal. It's just a thing. It's just a thing, but we don't have to let it dominate us. We can manage it. Yeah. Right.
Okay. Well, I'd like to say thank you very much to Bex.
Thank you.